So now Harold hires someone from the classified pages, and the simpleton who shows up on his doorstep sounds like a horrible... Lawnmower Man is the story of a telekinetic superhero who fights crime with his sentient space alien Lawnmower adopted son. I mean, it really isn't, but that would have been pretty damn cool. Nah, Lawnmower Man is, in fact, the result of an unholy union between Carrie, Tron, and Forrest Gump. And no, that one is not a joke. That's basically what this is. 90s James Bond plays Dr. Angelo, a scientist specializing in virtual reality technology and strapping monkeys to hula hoop machines. At least until his best monkey goes hula mad and trigger happy, trying to escape the lab and start the monkey revolution. Think Caesar from Planet of the Apes, except portrayed as a hand puppet and killed within 3 minutes. So, that part's done now. So now Dr. Angelo really needs a new test subject for work. The experiments were actually meant to increase intelligence, but monkeys apparently get kinda twitchy, so what's better than a monkey? A mentally challenged landscaper. This is Simple Jack. Wait, no. This is Job. Job's brain don't work so good, but he loves building and using lawnmowers. He doesn't love being beaten by his priest landlord, though. That part kinda sucks. And so does getting bullied by Gas Station Man. But he occasionally gets to read comics and play VR games with his friend Peter, so that's fun. So anyway, Dr. Angelo starts injecting Job with brain juice, a different batch of brain juice than the monkeys got, which shouldn't cause aggression issues this time. And it works. Job's brain starts lighting up like a wrinkly disco ball, and suddenly he's good at all the video games. Except Dark Souls, but he tried. Things start looking up for Job. He gets to dress like Tron and spin around in a giant pair of balls with James Bond. He becomes smarter than a 5th grader, and then starts dressing up like the Marlboro Man so he can ride the community bicycle like the other grown-ups. But things start going sideways. Dr. Angelo's greedy supervisor, Lex Luthor, and the company's director, Hank, swap the good brain juice for the evil brain juice.
Brainwave parameters.
Brainwave pattern altered.
And then Job's next round of virtual reality brain surgery goes wrong, and his brain swells up like a swollen brain. You think of something clever in the comments below. It's good for engagement. Help a brother out. Job develops telekinesis and telepathy, but also psychic headaches and an intense desire to mind fuck his girlfriend Silly in VR. So that happens, and yep, her brains got mixed up like a damn McFlurry. Job then heads to the lab and injects himself with all the evil brain juice, and develops a craving for vengeance, literally mowing down Peter's abusive dad, de-rezzing Father Ted, and cutting Gas Station Man's brain down to size. Meanwhile, Dr. Angelo has had a very intense meeting where his bosses politely informed him his work will be used with the military. He doesn't like that and leaves, gets kidnapped, and then leaves again, seeing the fruits of Job's murderous labor after finally getting home. Job comes to see him and really tries to sell Dr. Angelo on the metaverse, but even Angelo knows it's lame and wants nothing to do with it.
I believe the metaverse is the next chapter for the internet.
Idiot. Goddamn idiot!
Suddenly, the company kill squad rolls up in the party wagon to assassinate Angelo, but Job turns them into human bubble wrap and Thanos snaps them away. And this particular effect looked as good here in 1992 as it does in Thor 4. Good job, Marvel Studios. Job claims the virtual world isn't quite so virtual, and he's becoming the cyberchrist of that parallel dimension. And yes, that's a direct quote.
Cyberchrist.
The two disagree, and after tying Dr. Angelo to a chair, Job heads off to the company to complete his digivolution into Cyberchristmon. He and his ride-or-die landscaper bro do a full frontal assault on the well-guarded front gate, assisted by a massive swarm of digital bees, summoned from the VR Wonderland, or some shit. Look, I don't know, okay, this whole damn thing went off the rails like 15 minutes ago, and I'm losing my shit over here. Sadly, Landscaper Bro gets camped by a chump in a turtleneck sweater, to which Job telepathically makes him unalive himself. Cut to Angelo, Peter, and Mrs. Peter's mom driving casually in awkward silence. Then cut to Lex Luthor trying to rip his Nirvana CDs, when suddenly Job arrives to dish out some violent retribution against the bald music pirate. He gets turned into Vector Man for his crimes. So Job climbs once more into the game sphere to upload his innards and become the world's first CGI Cenobite. Angelo arrives and, after isolating the company mainframe so Job can't spread to outside networks, starts planning explosives around the building, taking time to admire the lifelike practical effects made for the movie.
Nice models!
We're also gonna pretend like Job's body wasn't mummified here, even though his frickin' head is gone in this shot, cause otherwise the sequel can't happen. Angelo mounts up in his own hamster ball and takes the form of the Silver Surfer to battle Job in cyberspace. And by battle, I actually mean float in place like a dumb and get swatted away until Job decides to crucify him. Our hero, ladies and gentlemen. Would you believe this man went on to fistfight a tree? Job tortures him a bit, hitting him with Cyclops eye beams and the dreaded double wet willy, until Peter enters the soon-to-kaboom building just in time to become a casualty. Except Job still has a heart and cares about his little friend, and sets Angelo free to rescue the boy.
Peter. Peter is here.
He's in here, he's gonna die!
I don't want one. Save him.
The building explodes, and Peter momentarily transforms into a grown-ass stuntwoman to dramatically dive away from the flames. But the pair survive. Job, meanwhile, finally gets to do the one thing he never got to try with his girlfriend. Enter the back door.
Out that door!
Sometime later, Angelo is preparing to move with both Peter and his mom. He vows to continue his work underground, where no government or military can interfere. Just as they prepare to leave, the phone rings. All around the world, in fact, as Job wants to tell everyone the good news about Cyberchrist. Wow. So yeah, this thing was based on a short story by Stephen King, who's already a rooty-tooty wackadoodie, but when you add a dash of Hollywood and a serving of 1992 CGI to the mix, you get whatever the hell this is. I had a good time, don't get me wrong. I really enjoyed the character work in the beginning portion. Job is very easy to sympathize with. He's just a simple-minded guy trying to make the best of the hand he was dealt, despite being whipped and beaten down by the embodiment of Stephen King's tired-ass hatred of religion. And the actor Jeff Fahey has those sad Frodo eyes that carried Elijah Wood through the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. And Pierce Brosnan does well as a beleaguered scientist who loses grip of his morals just long enough to maybe accidentally give birth to a digital devil. Oops. But it's all a bit broad and sadly pretty undercooked. Jeff Fahey did a good job making you feel for Job, but a big chunk of his descent into villainy is comprised of awkward computer graphics that immediately detach you from the character and all emotions. I mean, every time Cyber Job is on screen, I'm having Vietnam flashbacks to the real adventures of Johnny Quest, and it's hard to focus on a movie when I'm curled up on the floor reliving childhood traumas. If anything, this movie sprung into existence about 10 years too early, minimum. I'm not saying it would have been an instant classic if it released in the early 2000s, but the CGI parts might have at least looked better than Beast Wars. As it is, it's an alright way to pass some time if anything you heard or saw here makes you curious. It's actually free on YouTube right now as part of Creature Features, which is how I finally watched it, so there's an easy option. It's not good, but there are some good things in it. The sequel, on the other hand, is a goddamn masterpiece, and the only reason I finally watched this one is so I could review that one. So believe it or not, Lawnmower Man was a big hit for New Line Cinema, being their highest profiting theatrical movie during the year it released. So they wasted no time announcing a sequel, though it didn't actually release until 4 years later. The movie opens with a replay of the scene where Job got to use the back door, before cutting to footage from a trial where we meet Dr. Trace. Trace is fighting for ownership of his creation, the Chiron chip, but loses, and the rights to the chip's design instead go to his former employers. We then cut back to the explosion at VSI from the first movie, seeing firefighters arrive on the scene. They find Job somehow still alive despite being mummified and apparently beheaded in part 1, but shut up, that part never happened. Job is still in pretty bad shape, so they whisk him away to ER. This time around, New Line didn't want to spend a lot of money on a terrible CGI model for Cyber Job, so they skipped a step and just recast the part with Max freaking Headroom himself. Yes, boys and girls, that's right. Jeff Fahey didn't return as Job, so the recast was written into the script by claiming Job's face was disfigured in the explosion, and so extensive plastic surgery was performed. And I guess at some point his legs popped off too. I hate when that happens. Job ends up in the custody of a company called Virtual Light Industries, somehow. for reasons that totally make sense. The very same company that owns the Chiron chip patent. Unfortunately, Job's brain is back to being a few pancakes short of a full stack. And I know what you're thinking. Well, Baffled, that must be because his consciousness was uploaded to the internet at the end of the first movie. And you know what, random viewer? That almost kinda makes sense. So no, that's not it. That never happened, silly. The phone apocalypse was just a dream or something. Nah, somebody just accidentally hit the reset button on his brain. And he seems very fixated on Peter for some reason.
Only one way to find out. Hello, can you hear me? Peter, Pumpkin Eater. I want you to try and visualize all the people and places that you've had contact with in your life. Joe! Hey, Joe!
Hi, Peter.
So VLI, which is totally different from VSI in the first movie, plop his down onto a VR rig because, well, in this whack-ass universe, virtual reality is kind of a cure-all. And as a bonus, Job's got himself a sexy doctor to whisper in his ear to give him the feel-goods. Too bad this Jason Wynn-looking motherfucker owns the company. By the way, Spawn video coming soon, maybe. And just like everyone who resembles Martin Sheen, he's up to no good. But at some point during Job's VR rehab, there's a sparky mishap and he reconnects with his smarter persona. That's right, Cyber Christ has risen, bitches. Cut to a few years later and the world is Blade Runner. Just, yeah, straight up Blade Runner. In 1996. And no, the sudden technological and cultural leap is never explained. I guess the director or the production designer just looked at the Super Mario Bros. Movie that released a couple years earlier and said, yep, our movie should look like that too. And now we're reintroduced to Peter, a homeless teenager living in Los Angeles with his girlfriend and a whole gang of cyberpunk goonies. But Baffled, what happened to his mom and Dr. Angelo? Ah, yes, that's a very good question that I don't think even the writers can answer in a satisfactory way. They were much more concerned with making Peter out to be a piece of shit hacker who steals information from people. He and the Goonies gather in their absolutely badass abandoned subway secret hideout to use a trap door into cyberspace.
Trapdoor access to cyberspace granted.
Yeah!
For some co-op VR. And man, I love that this dingus trained his dog to operate the console and switch discs for them while they're all wearing the goggles. Look at this fake paw, it's f***ing adorable, ain't it? So they're flying through the VR wonderland until they're effectively shot down when the program is hijacked. They load in some red bikes that I'm sure were meant to be references to Akira, making me feel like this movie is starting to cyberpunk too close to the sun over here. Some biker henchmen suddenly spawn and give chase, leading to our hero Peter clotheslining himself on a tree limb like an absolute putz. Even the dog looks embarrassed to know him after this. Oh, also, Job was just hanging out in this exact spot disguised as a gargoyle. He reveals himself to Peter, but Peter understandably has no clue who this bald freak dressed like an extra from Stargate is. Until Job shows him his old big red lawnmower for member berries. Job then unloads a wacky story about being trapped in the cyberscape, which is also dying because that's what the script says in this moment, and Peter needs to go find Dr. Trace and tell him Job is building the Chiron chip. And then Peter gets shot in the chest from the freaking grassy knoll and knocked the fuck out of cyberspace. And apparently we going by Matrix rules now, because this mop-headed dork has to be resuscitated by his friends. That seems just a little dangerous to me for such a mainstream technology, but what the hell do I know? I don't live in Blade Runner land because fuck Ridley Scott. Also, I never actually watched Blade Runner yet. Anywho, a senator arrives at VLI for a tour and an explanation of the Chiron chip project, at which point this happens.
Virtual reality has evolved from simulation to an actual place. Watch your head, those monitors will kill you.
Ooh, foreshadowing. Oh, and then a lot of exposition is said about the damn Chiron chip that I'm just going to show you now.
The outer circle represents the real world, the inner one virtual reality. The Chiron chip will open up these pathways simultaneously, so a network based inside VR can be accessed by everyone.
Then we get to see what Job does in his spare time when he's not creeping on kids, and oh man, this poor bastard. They couldn't even give him a damn Game Boy? At least Dr. Feelgood comes in to slip him a Twinkie. No, that's not a euphemism, you dirty-minded weirdo. She just wants to give him a delicious, creamy treat.
Twinkie!
Which he's not strong enough to open. But I really like this moment. They talk about the fact Job is getting no credit for building the chip, but he says he doesn't mind. Things in the outside world don't matter to him. Everyone there only treats him like he's half a person, which, in this case, is referencing his lost legs. But when you think about it, the same was true back before he got the brain booster from Angelo in the last movie, too. For most of his life, he's been treated like an outsider or a freak for one reason or another. It's just a gosh darn shame he turned into a murderous creep, I'll tell you what. Also a complete liar, since, as you may have noticed, he's not actually trapped in a dying cyberscape. Meanwhile, Peter has managed to very quickly track down Dr. Trace Meridian, bonus points if you can figure out what the hell I'm pointlessly referencing there, who has become a f***ing hippie and nowadays would probably be cancelled over his half-assed shaman cosplay. Because yeah, Trace gave up on technology when the Chiron ship patent was given to the company, and now he lives as a recluse with a vegetable garden, out in a desert somewhere. They also try to treat him like some kind of desert wizard, because as Peter rolls up on his dirt bike, we see Trace's feet up on a cliff overlooking his house, and then just a few seconds later, he appears from the opposite side of his house. He's all calm and mysterious at first, but I like to imagine this lame-ass chucklehead absolutely booking it down the cliffside and then sprinting around the back of his house just so he can pull the mysterious stranger act to impress this random kid. Sorry, that just always bothered me. We may move on now. So yeah, this is where we find out Peter's mom died at some point. We don't find out what happened to Dr. Angelo, but fun fact, apparently Trace was supposed to be Angelo. But by this time, Pierce Brosnan had gotten the James Bond gig for GoldenEye and wasn't looking back, so the character was renamed and rewritten. So Trace decides he's going to help Peter and heads to the Brat Cave, and you just gotta love the acting prowess on display here.
You all live down here?
Oh no, this is just our summer cottage.
I think this guy can help us, okay?
Adults have betrayed me my whole life. You know that, Peter. Yeah.
Look, Travis, you don't have to trust him. You just gotta trust Peter.
Yeah.
This is where I'd list my wonderful patrons. If I had any. Trace finally asks Peter why he even trusts Job, and then he kinda recaps the whole plot of the first movie in a very nonchalant way, but clearly learned nothing from the experience, and then brushes it off like it's no big deal.
He's not like you. I mean, he's like a kid. At least he was until my next door neighbor did some experiments with him in VR and turned him from a simpleton into a genius. Look, we're wasting time.
And somehow not one single person in that room has any further questions. Peter jacks into cyberspace and Job finds him and immediately starts spewing some insane bullshit that somehow everyone else finds charming?
It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Doctor. I feel like we're almost... I'm blushing. Family. Incest. The game the whole family can play.
And it's at this point I realized that Matt Frewer must have been directed to play Job the way Jim Carrey would have if the production could have afforded him, because that's exactly what this batshit performance is. It's Max Headroom acting like Jim Carrey playing the Riddler as Job. If that ain't a Russian doll full of cringe, I don't know what is. Ew, I just said cringe. Be coming down with something. F***ing Zoomer germs and shit. The charm wears off quickly though, as Job shows off the Chiron chip and then tells everyone what he's really after.
Look what I'm doing, Doctor.
What do you want?
Egypt.
Come on, don't hold back on me. It's a hidden nano routine encoded into the design of the Chiron chip.
I'm not going to help you.
Tell me what Egypt means, Doctor, before I get really pissed off!
And when Trace doesn't give up the 411 on Egypt, Job finally reveals he still has his god complex and then tries to murder Peter in front of everyone. And when that doesn't work, he hacks the subway system to try and hit them all with an entire freaking train. And I'm sorry, but this is the most intense battle of wits I've ever seen committed to film, no question.
The game is afoot.
With their badass home base destroyed, the Goonies now have to access the internet like all the other homeless people, by visiting the public library. Also, you briefly see it earlier, but now it really gets time in the spotlight, so as someone who also owns an ice cream truck, I just wanted to point out Trace's cool ride. You might recognize this same make and model as the Obese Brothers truck from Good Burger. And that's your ice cream truck trivia of the day. Oh, but anyway, our heroes talk a lot of computer bullshit.
You've got to strip away the layers within the program.
We've got a problem. I can't get past the memory lock to isolate the chain.
Just enhance the memory index. Actualize data.
And all of it is just to locate Dr. Feelgood, who Trace already knew, by the way. So how the f*** is this more efficient than using the phone book, you miserable jacked-in jackasses? But I do love this bit where Jade proudly hypes up her brother's burglary skills, and all he actually does is throw a garbage can through the window to steal the equipment they need.
So how are they going to do this?
No problem. My brother can handle it. He's great at this kind of stuff.
Trace meets with Feelgood and basically decides to piss her off by alluding to their maybe romantic past, but it was all a ploy so the kids could put a tracker on her car, which, by the way, they could have just done that anyway without the confrontation, so I guess Trace just has a mean streak. Also, by the way, apparently that senator's visit to VLI didn't go well because he's on a flight back to Washington to recommend they revoke the company's license to go online, because that's a thing. So, Job does some hack foo and kills him and everyone else on board after some nudging from evil boss man. And this poor schmuck just happens to witness Job celebrating, so now he's gotta die. R.I.P. good guy Guillermo. Dr. Feelgood arrives at work to find Job and his team making moves without her authorization at the behest of Bossman, which is kinda confusing because Job already seems to be moving freely through the internet, but hey, I'm no expert on this either. So far as I know, the internet is just a series of tubes. So Feelgood identifies as a man long enough to infiltrate the sanctity of the stanky men's bathroom and confront Bossman. It's here that we learn the bad guy is badder than bad because he's been delaying a fancy pair of prosthetic legs for Job because, well...
Well, I couldn't have him literally getting up and walking out of us now, could I?
And there's some truly wonky editing here as Feelgood later snoops around the office and seemingly teleports a couple of times. I can only imagine the editor was so honored to be working on this masterpiece that he fell asleep during an all-nighter and slammed his face on the equipment a couple of times. Subscribe for more like this. Jade hacks the security system and allows Peter and Trace to sneak inside VLI. They try to steal the Chiron chip by ripping off Raiders of the Lost Ark and quickly swapping this ice cube for the chip, but the pesky thing about ice is, it melts. And you really gotta love this moment where Peter and Trace play a high-stakes game of laser tag with Job. But Feelgood spoils the fun. But at least we finally get the payoff for Chekhov's TV. And as if ripping off 2 Harrison Ford movies wasn't enough, our heroes then escape into the company trash compactor. They head all the way back to Trace's desert retreat just to find out that that wasn't even the real chip and everything was just a massive waste of time.
You idiot. You honestly think I didn't trust something that important to you?
VLI then hold a metaverse press conference for the most important people in the world, and a bunch of animated PNGs, where Job activates the Chiron chip and begins to count down to global interface, at which point he will replace every system in the world with himself. So basically exactly what he accomplished at the end of that last movie before somebody flipped the table and demanded a do-over. Meanwhile, Job hacks a helicopter and nosedives it straight into Trace's home just because somebody really wanted to recreate that one scene from Aliens. He then does what hackers foretold the year before and hacks the planet, causing mayhem and making it rain while announcing himself to the world as its savior.
Come to me, all who have burdens. I will set you free.
He also tricks the company's security force into shooting Bossman. Finally, our heroes jack into the cyberscape one last time for a final rip-off Akira bike chase down an internet superhighway to reach the Chiron chip's dome. Once there, Trace and Job have a sword fight that's almost as well choreographed as Vader vs. Obi-Wan.
30 seconds to global interface.
Just a lawnmower man, Job.
29, 26,
Lawnmower man is
25,
dead!
global interface. 19, 18,
Until Job is tricked into destroying the chip. Except Job claims he doesn't need the chip because he's the one and starts using his Green Lantern ring to pew-pew Trace. But, uh-oh, his battery dies and he blows up, while our heroes Peter Pan themselves back to the real world. Oh no, Bossman isn't dead and takes Peter hostage until Job trips him and he falls first onto a power cable. This redeems Job, I guess, who is now back to his pre-brain juice self, and they all live happily ever after. Oh boy, where do I even begin? So, the biggest problem with the first movie was that the CGI was distracting and took away from Job's character every time we had to watch him become a reboot reject. This movie avoids that mistake a bit by relying on CGI a little less. We see computer-generated environments, of course, but instead of wonky character models, we just see the actors themselves green-screened in or running around actual sets meant to be the virtual world. I prefer this, since it wasn't as jarring to me and didn't detach me from the characters. We're also not lacking action scenes, as you can probably tell by now. This movie practically mimics all that came before it. Blade Runner, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, Akira, Aliens. Lawnmower Man 2 is riffing on a lot of heavy hitters. And this is a weird one, man. Whoever decided Lawnmower Man needed a sequel deserves every pretentious and pointless award Hollywood has, because I adore this. It's a masterpiece of so bad it's good cinema. The plot is barely coherent, written by people who were convinced they knew what that newfangled internet thing was, and absolutely ran wild with it. One thing I gotta point out though, the editing is really freaking strange. I shouted out one instance of it earlier, but I caught multiple moments where frames are needlessly dissolved into each other, resulting in some visuals that can't possibly have been intentional. The cast is also a bit, confused. I mean, for one thing, if so many of your characters are going to be kids, then you should probably find decent child actors. The Lawnmower Man 2 casting agent did not. I guess Austin O'Brien did kind of alright as Peter, though at times he tried way too hard to act tough.
Back off, guys. This is the guy Joe told me about, alright?
It's kind of cool that they got his little brother to play Peter in flashbacks, but someone made the strange choice to have him wearing the same clothes as present-day Peter, as if the audience would be too stupid to know it's the same character. The other young actors were pretty rough. The dog was great, though. Shame he let that Oscar go to his head and developed a drug problem. Ellie Pouget did all right with her material as Dr. Platt, coming across as both sympathetic and tough when she needed to. At least the character was smart enough to uncover what was going on under her nose, but she's ultimately just learning things that the audience already knows about. Patrick Bergman as Trace is an interesting one. Bergman is a working actor. Dude has well over 100 credits to his name, actually, but you probably don't recognize him here without the mustache he had in all of his famous roles like Robin Hood. I don't think Bergman knows what the hell is going on all throughout this movie. He comes alive during the action-y bits, but otherwise he's kinda sleepwalking his way through gibberish pseudo-scientific lines. I'm sure someone would argue that was a choice, and it represents Trace's zen attitude or some other nonsense, but Bergman even came across that way when he was trying to explain the movie on Gamesmaster.
Well, my character is probably the character who's responsible for inventing virtual reality, and he has his ideas stolen from him. The major corporation gets a hold of his patent and creates in the character of Job a character whose full intent is to take over the world for the corporation. And my job, when I discover they're trying to do that, is to regain my patent and to save the world, basically.
Except for when he was passionately discussing his missing mustache.
Is it gone for good now, or is it just strictly for this one?
No, I think moustaches, because I've had a variety of moustaches, and I think that I use them really for different sort of characters. So my moustaches have made me some money, but who knows? You never know.
Matt Frewer is a f***ing maniac in this movie. And I don't just mean in the parts where he snorted a pallet of pixie sticks and channeled Jim Carrey's gay Riddler. No, I call him a maniac because he read the script to Lawnmower Man Part Freaking 2 and still cared about what he was doing. He could have just as easily turned in a good enough performance like his co-stars, but instead, he rolled the entire damn production into a Katamari ball and carried the whole shebang on his back. He tried his best here to keep Job consistent and as believable as was possible with this wacky stack of gibberish called a script. In the beginning, he plays a Job who lost unlimited power and is overtaken with depression and a longing to live again in the cyberscape. Man can't even unwrap his Twinkie for crying out loud. Frewer's Job only truly comes alive when he can enter that virtual space, where he can be carefree and adventurous and, yes, extremely goofy. But he still has to leave that space, and Frewer's line delivery becomes more downplayed and his humor becomes more dry in the real world. And of course, when he realizes he's close to regaining his power, his god complex bubbles back to the surface and allows Frewer to play things in a more sinister light. Keep in mind, I'm still not praising the script here. At the end of the day, this is a forced sequel to an entirely self-contained story that already reached its ending. And while watching this movie, especially in the beginning, you can practically see the screenplay writers jumping, backflipping, and somersaulting through hoops to make it make sense, until taking a tumble and horribly shattering their spines along the way. Oh, and about those writers, there's two of them. Farhad Mann, who also directed this movie and previously worked with Matt Frewer on Max Headroom, and Michael Miner, co-writer and creator of freaking RoboCop and whose IMDb page is a f***ing smorgasbord of RoboCop projects. So both of them were in their element here, just given a kind of impossible task. They weren't able to make a great movie, but they sure as hell made a fun one, at least in my humbly buffoony opinion. Yes, a lot of that is based on nostalgia. I first saw this on TV as a kid, late at night, far after I was supposed to be asleep. This magical cinematic masterpiece of what the fuckery came on, and I'll tell you what, I was never the same again. I truly don't even know if I can recommend this to anyone else. I may have the exact right kind of brain damage that could allow an individual to watch Lawnmower Man 2 and have a great time. Or it may genuinely belong in the fabled category known as so bad it's good entertainment. Frankly, the only way you'll find out is to watch it for yourself, and then come back here and blame me for your experience, whatever it may be. The Lawnmower Man short story focuses on a man named Harold Parquet. Harold is a lazy POS who's been paying a kid from the neighborhood to mow his lawn, up until the previous year when a dog chased a neighbor's cat near Harold's lawnmower that apparently had gale force wind levels of suckage. The lawnmower didn't make it. But I hear the cat bought a farm and lived a good long life tending his crops and definitely did not get slap-chopped into oblivion.
It's so easy, one finger. You're gonna love my nuts.
So now Harold hires someone from the classified pages, and the simpleton who shows up on his doorstep sounds like a horrible, fat meatbag with nary a brain betwixt his ears. We also get loads of unnecessary details about sports, stocks, and whatever else Stephen King read in his local newspaper that morning because his drug-addled brain and its sole surviving brain cell could think of no better way to pad out this story. Soon enough, Harold peeks outside and sees a big chunky lawnmower moving independently across his yard, while the Lawnmower Man crawls gleefully behind it, butt-ass naked, eating grass clippings as he follows in its wake. A mole tries to avoid the mower, but gets chased down and, suddenly receives a job offer to go work on the cat's farm while the mower goes back to cutting the grass. To make a not short enough story mercifully shorter, Harold discovers the Lawnmower Man is in fact a goat man and apparently part of a lawn mowing cult led by Pan. Oh, and after calling the cops, Harold gets shredded when the mower bursts into his house for grassy revenge, just like that one scene in the first movie. He wasn't invited to the farm, so his remains are later found in the birdbath by police. The end. Even a lot of King's fans don't hold the original short story in high regard, and I definitely don't recommend it, even as an audiobook. It's short, but also weird in a not at all charming way, with lots of padding when the story can be told in just a few minutes. King also goes on weird tangents, like going out of his way to describe Harold's underage daughter as buxom, when she's not even really a character in this story at all and didn't need to exist in the first place. I wouldn't recommend it in any of its forms, except maybe the comic version, because at least Walt Simonson's art is interesting to look at. Don't bother. But that's all I got for you guys today. I'm baffled, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!